All right, so I want to welcome everybody to tonight's SALT Talks. This whole month, we're talking about employment planning. You can say networking. It's all about employment for this month. Um, we've been talking since September about with transition. We went into project life, project search, some post-secondary options that you might have, and then into independent living, and then now into employment. And every time we have a presentation, someone always brings up OOD. So I thought you can't go through the year without having OOD present, so everybody becomes aware of who they are, because it keeps coming up. And we have several presentations throughout the rest of this year, and OOD will come up again. So um, I'm going to turn it over to, we have Rachael Spangler here. She's vocational rehab counselor with the OOD program and organization. So I'm going to turn it over to Rachael and let you go ahead. And again, any questions you have, just throw them in the chat and I'll be keeping an eye on that. Okay, go ahead, Rachael.
Awesome. Sounds good. So like Patty said, I'm Rachael Spangler. I'm with OOD. I've actually been with OOD for almost 10 years. So I'm just going to go over the OOD process. And I don't have a PowerPoint, so I'm just going to be talking through it since I usually have a co-presenter, but I'm going solo today. So I'll talk this through, and whenever you have any questions, just drop them in the chat just so you don't forget them. So I'm just going to kind of go through the process, talk a little bit about services, what we do, just kind of a general overview of OOD. So just a little bit about what we do. We assist individuals with disabilities in order to find and keep jobs. So we help individuals find jobs who don't have jobs already, and then we assist individuals who already have jobs with maybe keeping their job if they're having any difficulties on the job. I'm a transition counselor, so I work with 14 to 22-year-olds. So I'm also assisting individuals with getting ready for employment. So all of those like pre-employment services and other activities. So I just want to start by talking a little bit about referrals. So anyone with a disability is eligible for OOD. So there's no sometimes there's misconceptions that we only work with individuals with severe disabilities, but we literally will work with anyone with a documented disability. So, as a transition counselor, I'm typically using, school records. So anyone on an IEP, a 504 plan, even if they're not on those, either of those, they would still be eligible as long as there is a documented diagnosed disability. And there are no age limits as long as you're 14 years old. That's the age to qualify for OOD. After that, there's no age limits. Anyone can access our services at that point. So also, once a case is closed, we are not a one-time agency. So, once a case has been successfully closed, or if it's not successfully closed, anyone can come back to us at any time. There doesn't have to be a amount of time. I mean, a case could be closed and you could come back a week later. So there's literally no timeline for that. So anyone can refer for services. So, clients, they can refer themselves, parents can refer, schools can refer, county boards can refer. I've also had therapists refer. So literally anyone can make a referral, family, friends. So literally anyone. Um, and there are a lot of different ways to refer. So some of the, I believe one of the handouts that you guys will have a link to we do have an online referral portal. So there are ways to do that online, or you can just reach out to an OOD counselor. So, for example, I have partnerships with all my schools that I cover. So, if the teachers want to make a referral, or if the county board makes a referral, they just reach out to me like via email, phone, whatever works. But there is an online, we do have an OOD portal that can take referrals as well. And then those referrals come to our caseload assistants, and then they assign them, based on who would get that referral. And then, information, like if you're making a referral directly to an OOD counselor, like when I have someone make a referral to me, I just ask that they send me, the client's name and, a few other pieces of information, typically name, date of birth, disability, um, their address, phone number, parent contact, pretty much because, and then their diagnosed disability, because we have a referral system that we put our clients into. So we have to have a certain amount of information to put them in there. If you are making a referral for someone and you have their social security number and you can provide that when you're referring them, that's also very helpful. Otherwise, we can get that at the intake meeting. But our case management system actually does not let us open an OOD case unless we have a social security number. So in the past, it was a lot more flexible. We could open a case at the temporary and then change it later. And that's it's sort of possible to do, but it's very challenging. So typically we just don't open a case unless we have that social security number. So once a referral is made, what will happen is a caseload assistant or a counselor will reach out and schedule an intake meeting. So I actually do all of my own scheduling and intakes, but some of our general counselors who are working with adults, they have a process where a caseload assistant does their intakes, and then the counselor picks up after that. So it could be handled different ways, but generally what will happen after the intake is, or after the referrals, that we'll get the intake scheduled. That way we can, get the case open, get the process started. So the intake is the first meeting that happens. It is typically an hour to an hour and a half. So I always book an hour, but I've had ones that have taken 45 minutes. I've had ones that have taken an hour and a half. So it really just depends on if they have a lot of questions, or, if there's more information to go through. So I personally, I don't want to ever rush anyone through an intake. So we always, block more time than we're going to need, just to make sure we have all that time. So what's covered in an intake is we talk about OOD services. We give the general overview. So maybe like a quick summary of OOD. We have some forms that we go over, that we talk about, and then we fill out some paperwork. So that's all done in an intake meeting. Some of the required documents are, we have our application for services, so we fill that out. We have our health assessment questionnaire. That's the form that we're required to fill out, that gathers, medical history, talks about their disability, limitations. It kind of helps us for eligibility purposes. And then there's consent forms. So the consent forms that we get signed at the intake meeting, those give us permission to talk to anyone that we would need to during the process. So for me, the consent forms I'm generally getting are consent forms for the school and consent forms for the county board. Also, we would get consent forms for, any doctors that they're seeing, if we need that information, if they have a therapist, we need to talk to that person. And then if they're over 18, of course, then we get consent forms for their parents. That way we can talk with them. So basically, if we don't have a consent form on file and someone calls us, asking a question about someone, we can't give them, any information unless we have that signed consent form. So another form that we go over during the intake meeting and we get signed is called the participant acknowledgement form. The PA form is basically a summary of rights and responsibilities and kind of what we expect of our clients. An example of something on that form would be, making sure you attend your meetings, you show up on time, you're prepared, you're engaged, you respond to any correspondence that we send, if it's email, phone, text, anything like that. So we have everyone sign that. And then for our clients who are eligible with the Board of Developmental Disabilities, we sign a rights of a person with a developmental disability. So that form is basically just an outline, an overview of, individuals' rights as a person with a disability. And then for counselors that are certified, they might be a certified rehabilitation counselor. Then there's another form that they sign called a professional disclosure, but not everyone has to do that form because not everyone's certified. So that one is, only done sometimes. So intakes can take place really anywhere. So for me, I'm mostly having my intakes at the school or at the library. We have a few like OOD like appointment centers in the area that our clients can meet as well. Um, and then other counties. So I cover Montgomery County, but other counties typically have an OOD office where meetings can take place also. So those are generally like where meetings take place. I have done home visits before. We typically don't do those because we have to go in groups. So we would have to have another staff member go with us. So home visits are not done very often. I've done a few of them. If, for example, if someone from the county is going to be there, then I'll go as long as I'm not the only one going. And if there's a reason why, like if there's a medical or a disability reason why a meeting at the home would be ideal, then we can discuss that and then get permission from our supervisor. But I would say meeting at homes is typically a last resort. I know some people have done intakes, at a restaurant or someplace like that. I typically avoid that because of confidentiality. I want to be meeting in a place where, no one's going to overhear what we're discussing, because during an intake, we're really discussing a lot of, personal information. Um, so at the intake, typically would be the client, the OOD counselor. If it's at a school, an intervention specialist, a case manager, someone from the school could join as well. If they have county services, an SSA, employment navigator, could join also. If student is under 18, we would have a parent or guardian there. And then if they're over 18, it's optional if they have a parent, or if they have a legal guardian, then we would have that person there as well. Um, so I really try to network. Like when I schedule an intake meeting, I always invite, someone from the school if I'm going to be having it there. Or if I know that they do receive county services, or I got the referral from the county, then I would just ask them like, hey, do you have anyone who wants to be at the meeting? Just to kind of start that, you know, multi-agency partnership right away, try to get everyone at the table just so everyone knows what's going on, can keep everyone updated. Um, and so that is pretty much the summary of kind of what's covered at the intake. Then we ask a lot of questions. The kind of the more interview portion of the intake after the forms are signed is we're asking kind of more about their disability, asking about like their education, about their job interests. What do they think they need from OOD? What would they benefit from? We talk about strengths, areas of need, past work experience, just everything that we would need to know, in order to proceed with services. So my goal when I'm doing an intake meeting is I want to get as much information as possible that I can draft the plan for the next meeting, and not have to call multiple times and ask like follow-up questions. So I tend to get really detailed at my intake just so I'm kind of covering everything, get to know my client better, they get to know me, and I'm gathered all the information I need, and also helps me for eligibility purposes. Um, so, talking about eligibility, timelines are typically after an intake meeting. Our agency goal is 30 days for eligibility. Sometimes it goes over 30 days. That's really if we're having trouble obtaining records, or, we need to get some additional information. But typically, 30 days is a pretty reasonable amount of time to determine eligibility. With transition students, it goes a lot quicker because we're just getting a lot of times their school records from the school, and kind of going through that eligibility process pretty quickly. But our agency goal is really to keep it under 30 days. So after the intake meeting, we start obtaining those documents that we need for eligibility, and those documents would include anything that can help us obtain you know get eligibility, anything that gives us like the diagnosis information. So for me, it's typically the IEP, the document that's done every year, and then the ETR, the reevaluation that's done every 3 years. Those are enough to determine eligibility because we can use all of the categories on ETR. I think there's like 15 different categories on there. So we're able to use all of those. A lot of counselors also will request medical records, especially if we're working with someone who's not in high school anymore. We're requesting, medical records, hospital records, really anything that can assist us with eligibility. And also, for the clients who have services through the Montgomery County Board of Developmental Disabilities or any county developmental disabilities, they have some records that we can generally use also. So just requesting any of those psychological evaluations, like anything that talks about their limitations and also has information on it regarding how they receive their diagnosis or what their diagnosis is. So those consent forms we get during the intake meeting, we're using those then to request that information. So some of the criteria for eligibility is our clients must have a disability, any disability. They must be interested in working, and they must benefit from at least one of our services in order to find and keep a job. Also, I was trying to, I lost my train of thought there. Okay. So, also we used to have a waiting list a while ago. So when we had that wait list, we came up with what we call functional capacity areas of limitation. And we still use those, but we don't, we serve everyone. We don't have a wait list now, but we still use those functional capacity areas. So there's 7 areas. And so they're communication, interpersonal skills, mobility, self-care, self-direction, work skills, and work tolerance. So our clients have to have a limitation in at least one of those areas. So, an example of some of those, mobility would be, like someone with a vision impairment or uses a wheelchair, anything like that. Interpersonal skills, kind of relationships with others, self-care, being able to take care of their, self-care needs, etc. Work skills is kind of talking about like accommodations they might need. Can they complete the job? Just limitations there. And work tolerance is kind of more physical, if they have any physical limitations. So that's kind of an example. But when I'm reading a IEP and ETR, I'm looking for what limitations do they have. And then they're placed in different categories, based on how many. So if they have at least one limitation, they're considered, they're in the disabled category. If they have 2, it's significantly disabled. And if they have 3 or more, then it's most significantly disabled. And again, that's not really, it doesn't matter how many they have. There's no, delay in services, but that's just kind of an explanation of how that works, how we're determining eligibility. So then once someone is determined eligible, you get a letter in the mail, and then we reach out to schedule the next meeting. So the next meeting is the planning meeting, and the plan has to be done within 90 days of eligibility. So typically, for example, when I make someone eligible, I call them right away and get the meeting scheduled. That way, we have that 90-day kind of window there. But sometimes there might be extra time taken to, choose providers or make decisions on the plan. So I try to have the meeting as soon as possible. That way we have that time if we need it, in order to get the plan finalized, so we don't have to do an extension for that. So we can do an extension if it gets over 90 days and, something's holding up the plan. But typically we're trying to do that within 90 days or less. So the plan for OOD is called the Individualized Plan for Employment, the IPE. And it's basically a backwards plan of everything that we're going to cover during the duration, of the case. So our final goal is for our clients to be working in the community at a, part-time, full-time job. So that's our final goal. The plan's going to outline what are we going to do to get to that point. So for transition students, those plans are usually a lot longer because we're working with them. If we get them at 14, we might be working with them for 5 or 6 years. So the plan's going to cover all the services that will be provided over that time. to reach that final goal of assisting them with finding a long-term job. So some of the things that are on the plan is a job goal. So the job goal is basically what type of job are we looking for. So with a transition plan, they're typically career exploration plans when we're writing a plan for someone who's in school still. So a lot of times that job goal will change. So we're kind of just picking, if we're working with someone who's 14 or 15, there's a chance that they probably don't know what they want to do, which is totally fine. But what we'll do is try to get them to tell us, like, what's something that you think you might like to do, or what do you want to explore a little further? That way we can put that as their job goal, and then also make a note of maybe here's some other areas that they want to explore. With the understanding that that job goal can change, as many times as it needs to. So, when we're starting with our younger students, sometimes that plan goal is changing 4 or 5 times, because they have different interests, or as we explore jobs with them more, they have a different idea. So we can amend that at any time. And once they finish with high school, then their plan is not an individualized, it's not a career exploration plan anymore. So at that point, we have to have a better idea of what is our job goal, what are we focusing on, and then at that point we add to the plan what we call labor market information. And that's basically telling us, okay, like, is this a good job goal? Here's how many jobs are available in the state of Ohio. Here's the projected growth over the next 10 years. Here's the median wage for that type of job. So basically, all of our plans have to have labor market information except our career exploration plans. So if I'm writing a plan for someone who's still in high school, then I don't have to put that information in there, because chances are their job goal is going to change a couple times. So also on the plan are the services, which I will talk more about services after talking about the plan, just to give kind of a summary of some of the services that can be on there. So the services are on the plan, and then the cost of services. So OOD covers the cost of, most of the services that we provide. So typically there's something we try to ask our clients to financially, contribute in some, way, typically a minor thing. Like what I do is I say they'll provide their own interview and work clothing, like something like that. But, we're paying for all of the, core services, transition services, job searching services, and everything. So all of that's listed on the plan. Also, their education's listed on the plan. So just a little summary of, here's what, where they're at in high school. Here's when they plan to graduate. Here's their future plans, kind of summaries of that. So that's on the plan. And then apart from the cost of services, there's also the providers that will be providing the services. So I will talk about those more also. But that will also be listed. And then the responsibilities of the client will be listed as well. So there's a section talking about responsibilities. An example of responsibilities are, a few examples would be, if I need a job coach, I will work with my job coach in order to find and keep a job. Or I will contact my counselor if there are any changes. I'll let my counselor know if I'm not interested in services anymore. It's just responsibilities along those lines. We'll check those, put those on the plan. And then we check in every year to do, we check in more than once a year, but we check in at least once a year to do an annual review. And during the annual review, we're talking about, how have things gone over the last year? What are future plans? Is there anything we need to change on the plan? So plans can be amended really anytime. I've had plans that have been amended 9, 10, 11 times. So there's no number of times. Plans can be amended whenever possible. It's pretty straightforward for the counselor. And then once the plan is finalized at the beginning, or we're doing a plan amendment, there's a few ways we can have a plan signed. So we have something called Aware Sign, which is where our case management system will send out links to your email, and our clients and our parents can sign that way. It's kind of like, people always ask me if it's like DocuSign, and I say it's kind of like that, but it looks different. And really, the main difference is it goes through our OOD secure system. So in order to sign a plan, it'll just have you set up a password. Um, and that's a really good thing to have anyway, because anytime we send an email out with information that's confidential, we have to send it securely. So chances are you'd probably would use that password more than once, not just for signing the plan, but also for like sending documents and things like that. A lot of times, just a generic email for checking in, like, hey, you need to schedule a meeting or something like that. That will probably not come secure unless it has any private information in it. If we're sending an email that's not secure, we typically would not even we would just put maybe the student's first name. We would not put even their last initial, just to kind of protect confidentiality. So that's the benefit of sending things securely. So that's one way plan can be signed, through AwareSign. We can also sign in person. So typically when we do the planning meeting, we're not ready to sign there because we still have to choose providers and then finalize the plan. There are those rare moments where I've had an intake, and maybe, the family has had services before, with another student or another, family member or friend or something. So they know at the intake meeting, like, here's the provider that they might want to work with. So that doesn't happen often, but it's happened at least one time. So for me, so I can, then most likely have them sign at the planning meeting, but that's really rare. But I can meet up again, counselors can meet up in person again, to sign in person if that's a preferred method. Um, we can also email, if the aware sign doesn't work, we can also email a PDF and, have our individuals and parents sign electronically, or they can print it out, sign it, scan it back in. That will also come through secure email. Um, and a lot of times, since I work with students, I have the teachers, just print the plan out and send it home with my students who their families don't really want to mess with the aware sign. So there are different ways to get that plan signed. Um, with the aware sign, when we send a link, you have 14 days to sign. So if it's for someone who's under 18, 2 links will come. One is for the student to sign, one's for the parent. And those links will be good for 14 days. And then if they expire, typically, so I get an email when they expire. The OOD counselor will get an email, and they'll reach out, just ask, like, are there any difficulty signing? We can resend the link. And it's really easy on our end just to go in and click a button and resend the links, but they are only good for 14 days before we have to send them again. And one thing that we have to do before finalizing the plan is choose providers. So the providers are the agencies that OOD contracts with, who offer all these services that, actually, my next section will be talking about services. So the providers offer all the services that we provide to our clients. Sometimes we call them providers. You also hear us call them vendors, community resource partners. So there's a few different names that kind of we use interchangeably. So it is completely up to our clients and their families what providers you work with. So we cannot choose that for you. Um, we can give suggestions, like, here's an agency that's a smaller provider, maybe you would prefer them for more consistency, or here's a larger provider, you might prefer them because they can transport clients, or here's a provider that offers every service on the plan. So we can give kind of some information like that, but we can't tell you, well, I think you should go with Goodwill or Capabilities, and because they're a really good provider, because it's not our choice to do that. And all of our providers have to be certified before they can offer services. So, all of our providers are going to offer a quality service. So typically what I do is, we have a provider search link, like a link that goes to our provider search, and I email that to my clients after the meeting. I'll tell them, here's our provider search link. You can go in here and look around at the different providers that offer different services. But what I also do, because our provider search link it's a little confusing, there's a lot of information there. I will also send a list of providers that, my clients work with the most. So honestly, every counselor does this a little bit differently, and it's not something that that we're required to do. So I don't know how many other counselors do that, but I found for me, and my clients, they it helps them out a lot to see a list. Like, here's the provider search link, but then here's a list of maybe 7, 8, 9 providers that our clients use the most. And then that way, when they go to that provider search link, maybe they can type in those providers and then see information about them. So it'll show like a provider scorecard, kind of giving you an idea of here's how many people this provider has placed in jobs. Just kind of showing like how they're doing, and because things fluctuate. So sometimes there's going to be a provider who's maybe placing more people than another provider. It doesn't mean that other provider's a bad provider. It's just maybe they're short staffed with job developers or job coaches, or whatever. So that can change. So that information is available, and there's really no set, like, we don't have a provider list that we send out through email. We did a long time ago, but now that we have the provider search, we don't. So it's something you could ask your counselor, when you send the provider search link, could you also maybe send me an example or a short list of providers? And then I'll also give them an example sometimes in the email, like, you can use this provider for every service, or maybe you choose one provider for this service and then another provider for the rest of them. So try to give them like examples just so they can kind of see, how that would work. And then if, families have questions about providers, then, as counselors, we can definitely answer those questions and still not steer you in any particular direction. So, once the providers are chosen, like I said, that's when we finalize the plan. Once we have that information, and then when the plan's finalized, then we get services started. So moving on to talk about services. So I have a list here of services that most of our more common services. I might be missing a few services from this list, but for transition, since I am a transition counselor, definitely all the transition services are included in here, and then some other services that we might provide later on. So one of the first sets of services that we're providing to our students would be pre-employment transition services. So these services are typically provided in high school. They can be provided, I've provided them before for someone in college. It just has to be, before they turn 22. So if they're in college, 19, 20 years old, then we could still provide some of these services. But then once they turn 22, we can't do the pre-employment transition services, or pre-ETS for short. We can't do those services anymore. So there are 5 pre-employment transition services. And the first category is called instruction and self-advocacy, which is really just focusing on, students being able to advocate, working on communication skills, but kind of relating that, to the workplace. So, talking about maybe requesting accommodations, things like that. So that's the first module. And then these do not have to be done in any particular order. I'm not even giving them in a particular order. So, it's really up to, the individuals or the providers can have a discussion on maybe what they start with. The second category is called counseling on post-secondary options. That one is focusing on college. So talking about, different types of colleges, financial aid, accommodations in college, like pretty much everything college is counseling on post-secondary options. Actually, that one just got renamed to counseling on post-secondary opportunities. And then there is work readiness training, which is really talking about interviewing, talking about, job applications, having a professional email address. That's a big topic with our students because a lot of them do not have professional email addresses. So we just kind of have a discussion once you get into the workplace, the working where you're starting to apply for jobs, we need to have something a little more professional. Also, a professional voicemail greeting. That's another big one that we talk with our students about. Another one I've ran into a lot is also, a lot of my clients do not have their voicemails set up. So we have a conversation about that too, the importance of making sure you have a voicemail set up. And then so that is work readiness training. And then job exploration counseling, that's really diving more into career exploration activities. So talking about different jobs, maybe doing some informational interviews, um, things like that. If they're not sure about what type of job they're interested in, then maybe we'll do some interest inventories, things like that, just to kind of help them narrow that down a little bit. So that's job exploration counseling. And then the final category is called work-based learning. And that's the one where we actually get them out into the community and do some job shadowing, worksite tours, more hands-on activities, just so they can, see the jobs that they're potentially interested in. Pre-employment transition services are offered, and there's 5 of them, and each one has 3 parts. So part 1 is like a pre-assessment. Let's talk about the service. There's a little assessment they do. Then part 2 is just kind of the the main materials covered, and then part 3 is a post-assessment, kind of a wrap up of that service. So all of our pre-ets are offered in three parts like that now, and that's actually new. We started that, I think, in October of 2024. So that's still kind of relatively new to us and our providers of how we provide that. So another transition service is called Summer Youth Work Experience. This is a good program for our individuals who maybe they haven't had a job before and they're not quite ready for a job, but they want to try working in the community. So we offer our summer work experience. It can be offered at 2 different levels. So level 1 is a shorter program, maybe like 1 or 2 weeks. And then level 2 is your 5 weeks. So that's more oftentimes than not, it's provided at a level 2 at 5 weeks, which is typically around 20 hours a week, paid work experience. So we pay our clients through a vocational training stipend. So when they finish the program, they will receive a paycheck at the end. They do have a job coach on site during that. It's done in groups of 1 to 4 students, and we can offer it as an individualized work experience as well. It's not as common, like typically we're doing it in groups, but if we have a client who maybe they were not sure how they would do in a group, or usually it's a disability reason, like they need a more specific type of job, because our summer work experience program, typically in the Montgomery County area, we have usually 3 or 4 different providers offering it. So the only options we have are, the sites that they have established. But if we need someone who has more specific needs, then we can do an individualized work experience for them. And that really depends on availability. Sometimes we have providers that can do that. Sometimes it's a little trickier. We don't have providers who can offer it on an individual basis. But more often than not, we have at least one provider who can do that. And then, that gives us flexibility too on if we want to do 1 or 2 weeks, or if they can do the whole 5 weeks, or if they can do the whole 5 weeks, can they do 20 hours a week, or maybe do we need to look at maybe 10 or 15 hours a week? So it just gives us a lot more flexibility. Typically that program is done once students are 16. I've offered them a few times for individuals who are not quite yet 16. Either they turn 16 during the program, or maybe right after the program they'll turn 16. The only difference then is that if they're under 16, they have to get a work permit. And then if they're over 16, they don't. So typically, we wait till 16 because a lot of times our, 14, 15-year-olds aren't necessarily ready for that work experience. And the summer youth work experience can only be offered one time. So, we don't want to do that program. Maybe, it wasn't a good time. And we could have maybe waited the next summer and it would have been a better time. We can do that summer work experience program up until the senior after the summer after their senior year of high school. So if a student defers their diploma, to stay in school until they're 22, then we can offer that the summer up until they're 22. So say they defer their diploma and they stay in school until they're 21 and then they exit and that summer they're still 21, we can still do it that summer. But like if they age out at 22, maybe April and they finish, then we wouldn't be able to do the summer program because then they would be 22. So a lot of times I suggest that we start with pre-employment services and then maybe do the summer work program, the next summer, just to make sure that they're ready and kind of have started looking at, work skills and developing their work skills a little bit. A common question that comes up is, will the summer youth work experience impact income for our students who are receiving Social Security? So the answer is no, because in order for, if you're under 22 years old and you're enrolled in school, you can make up to, it's around $2,000 a month before Social Security is impacted. And during the summer work experience program, if a student works 20 hours a week getting paid at minimum wage, minimum wage being $10.70, they're going to make, around $1,070 and, before taxes. So they wouldn't be making enough to impact Social Security. And we have like a fact sheet, like a handout that we can provide to our clients who are maybe receiving Social Security. That way they have that information. And that amount changes every year. I know it's close to $2,000 right now, but they update that every year because that typically goes up. So another service that we provide is called job development. Job search assistance is what we're calling it now. And it's offered, job search assistance is offered either permanent or non-permanent. So non-permanent is for our individuals who are in high school or college. And, this isn't their full-time, long-term job. This is their first entry-level job, just get some work experience. So, that's non-permanent. And then permanent is once they're completely finished with school and they're looking for a job that they intend to keep long-term. So, what job development is it's offered in 3 parts. So, and this is also new as of October. We used to call them tiers, but now they're parts. So part 1 is, working on the resume, practicing interviewing skills, kind of developing a job development plan that kind of talks about here's how many hours they want to work, here's their, the rate of pay, here's the types of jobs. So the job development plan, includes all that. Also in part 1, we are having them register for Ohio Means Jobs. So those, and they have to have their resume approved by an OOD counselor in part 1. And then once part 1, all those activities are wrapped up, then we have a kickoff meeting. That's where the client, maybe they're someone from their family, parent, guardian, the job developer and the OOD counselor meet. The job developer goes over the job development plan. We talk about their plan, and then that's when we have time to address, any concerns, any questions. And then the counselor gives the okay that the job development plan is approved, and then we can move on. So then part 2 is really applying for jobs. And typically individuals will meet with their job developer once a week for about an hour. We can, job developers can assist with applying for jobs. If our clients want to apply for jobs on their own and they're able to, that's fine. Just, keeping their job developer updated. That way they know, what's going on, and everyone's on the same page. So typically we check in every 3 months during the job search assistance part 2, just to see, how are things going? Have you had any job interviews? Is there anything that we need to change for the job search if you're not getting a lot of interviews? So that happens every 3 months. And then if we get to 9 months, and after that, we have to meet every month. A lot of times we don't get to 9 months, but it can happen. And, we might have to change something, maybe change the job goal. And then also, when we're doing job search assistance on the non-permanent level, we don't really have to focus on a particular job goal because that's their entry level job. I mean, really, they could apply for really whatever job is a good fit. It's an entry level job for them to get some experience. So we're not really particular on it has to be a certain job goal. Now, when we're looking on the more permanent level, like once they're finished with high school, college, then we have to stick more in our job goal. So I always tell my job developers it's okay to kind of stray outside of that job goal a little bit, but just let your counselor know, make sure they approve it and they're okay with that. So that's definitely more strict on the permanent level. Then part 3 of job search assistance is once, job coaching, which we'll talk about job coaching next, but once job coaching is finished, we check in for 90 days. We call that job retention. That's just to see, okay, is everything going okay on the job? Is there anything that needs to be changed? Do we need some more job coaching? What else can we do? To help. That's for 90 days. On the non-permanent level, after that 90 days, we are not closing their OOD case because chances are they either still have some high school left or they're still in college. So we want to keep their case open. That way we can help them find the more permanent job later on. Now, if this is done on the permanent level, then at the end of that 90 days, that job retention, we close their case successfully because, everything's going well on the job, then they don't need any additional services. Job coaching is the service that's provided for our clients to assist them with learning their job. So once our clients get a job, we make sure they have a job coach. They can be there with them through the orientation, to help them learn their job. There's really no, a lot of times I get asked, well, how long is a job coach there? There's really no set time. I mean, I've had job coaches who are there for a day, and then I've had job coaches that are there for a couple weeks, and then I've also had job coaches that are there for a couple months. So it really just depends. It's okay to have a little bit more extended job coach, like a couple months, as long as progress is being made. If progress is not being made after a couple months, then we have to think about, well, maybe this isn't the right job. Maybe we need to reassess and look for something else. So, but as long as progress is being made, we can continue coaching, but then we could just start to fade out a little bit. So it's not like the job coach is there one day and then the next day they're gone and, you're on your own. So it's not really that fast. We fade it out slowly. So like maybe we have a job coach there for the whole shift for a week. And then maybe the second week we have them there for, half the time. And then, just kind of go down from there, just less and less. Until they're more independent. And then we kind of fade the job coaching out. Then we also do individualized career exploration. That is just exploring jobs in the community. It's kind of like the pre-ETS job exploration counseling, but it can be offered for our clients who maybe didn't do pre-ETS or need some additional career exploration. Vocational evaluation. This is a service that we do once, if our clients are interested in college, it kind of assesses their educational skills, kind of helps determine is college an appropriate goal. If so, here's some jobs that might be appropriate. If not, here's some jobs that would also be appropriate. It's not like it doesn't really determine if they can go to college or not. It just sometimes helps determine, can we support the job goal and that you're wanting to pursue in college. And then, if not, then maybe what else can we do? And college is actually a whole nother discussion. And we have college to career counselors who are at most of the colleges in the area, the community colleges and the state colleges. So they know a lot more about the ins and outs of college, and are good individuals to reach out for that. So they typically would get all of the college cases. We can also do what's called a work incentives planning. That's just an assessment of, if you receive Social Security, how will working impact you receiving Social Security? How much can you work before your benefits are impacted? How will it impact your insurance? So really just kind of giving you an idea of how Social Security would be affected. And then, so those, one other service that we support for our transition students is called Project Search. That is a school-based job readiness training, and we provide the job coaches for for Project Search. So there's a few Project Searches in the Montgomery County area, and that's typically the last thing that a student will do before they accept their diploma. So they can do it right after, their senior year. They can defer their diploma and then attend Project Search. We also, just to mention a few more services briefly, we also can provide assistive technology. So if someone needs a computer or something to do their job, we can do an assistive technology like assessment, see what's needed, and then talk about if there's anything that we would be able to provide for that. We typically don't do this on the transition age level, so I don't discuss this in too much detail, but we have a service that's called a community work experience. And it is like a summer youth work experience, but for individuals who are not in school. So if someone comes to us as an adult and maybe they need a work assessment to see, if they're able to work, or is work, is this a good job goal for them, then we would do that community work experience mostly for those individuals. Having a transition caseload, I've probably done only like 4 or 5 of these in all my time of being here, because I'm typically using the summer youth work experience. There's always, some exceptions for that, but it is very rare on the transition age level. So we have a few services that are called I explain them as like secondary services. So if you have a case open with us, and if we're providing one of our core services like job development, pre-ETs, something like that, usually those two, job development, job coaching, pre-ETs, those few services. If we're already providing those, we can look into travel training, which is training our individuals on how to use the public transportation. And then we can also do driving. For driving, there is permit tutoring, which is helping individuals study for getting their driver's permit. And then there is on-the-road driver's training, which is actually driving with an instructor. A lot of times I have individuals, a lot of us have counselors will have individuals come to us and say, can we open a case just for driving? And we have to say no, because we really can't. Our main focus is employment. So if we're providing one of those core services, then we can definitely discuss adding those transportation driving services to the plan. So just a few, so that's services that go on the plan. I now just have a section of kind of various like random things that either we've been asked or that I feel are kind of important to the process. So we check in every 90 days. We're required to check in. It doesn't have to be an in-person meeting, but typically like a phone call, text, email, or, we can check in person if that's best. So every 90 days. If we cannot make contact, and maybe we've reached out via text, we've reached out phone, we've left a voicemail, we've sent an email. If we reach out 3 times and we do not hear back, we will send what is called a no contact letter. which will then give you 15 days to reach out to us. So it'll basically say something like, we haven't heard from you. Are you still interested in services? If we don't hear from you and, by this date, then, we're assuming that maybe you're not interested in services anymore and your case will be closed. A lot of times when we send those letters, then, we have people contact us. So sometimes just getting that letter kind of helps reestablish that contact. But I just like to mention that contact is important, and we need to definitely stay in contact. We typically don't close cases while in high school because, as I mentioned earlier, we want to be able to help obtain that more long-term job, and help with any services after high school. The only reason I've ever closed a case if someone is in high school is if I can't get a hold of them, the whole contact issue. Or if they ask me to close their case, they're not interested in services anymore. Otherwise, we'll typically keep the case open. And we can have a transition case open even if we're not providing services. If they're enrolled in high school, they don't necessarily have to be participating in anything at that time, but we'll still do our check-ins just kind of every 90 days. I know I mentioned this before, but just to mention again that, we can have multiple OOD cases open. There's no timeline for that or anything. And a case is typically closed successfully once clients are completely finished with school. They're working a job that they plan to keep long term, and they've been working for 90 days without any supports from OOD. The final thing that I want to mention, because this has also come up a lot lately, is there are a lot of programs called CTP programs, so college training. I think it's college training prep programs. I always forget what the acronym stands for, but an example of those would be Tartan Tops at Sinclair. OOD cannot financially support those programs, so I do have a lot of clients who go through those programs, and I keep their case open, and we still can provide like pre-employment transition services. If they're under 22, we can help them find a part-time job. We can still provide those services, but we cannot financially support a CTP program. And that is really those are my notes. That's my summary of OOD. So now we can definitely open it up for questions.
All right. I pulled up the completing an application, Rachel, from one of the handouts. I have that up on the screen. So I figured, if they want to ask questions, but I'll leave that up so they have numbers, and it looks like a QR code for that.
Oh, right. So that's the one. Yeah, that's the one that they can scan that QR code, and it takes them, I believe, to our like referral portal, so they can make a referral.
Okay, yeah, that just so they have something there to reference. We did put the link to the handouts in the chat box if you want to go through all the different items that Rachel spoke about. Just to let's see. So we have different parents at different stages, I guess I want to say. So the person that their child is 14 or 15, just starting this whole transition process, is it better if maybe they even didn't connect to the county board of DD? Is it better for them to connect to services, or would they work through their IEP teacher first at school? Where do they go to first if they're just starting out for the very first time? What's the best way for them to get connected, to get this whole process going, so they have a team around that IEP table?
So I would say that I think they can apply for county board services and OOD services really at the same time. I feel like they're both really important at that age. I would say, if they find out about services through their IEP team, then their IEP teacher can make the referral. Otherwise, if parents know, about our services, they can reach out and make the referral. And typically when I have an intake meeting, and most counselors will do this also, they will ask, like, do you have services with the county? And if not, we can provide the phone number to get registered with the county. So it can really go either way, but I would say refer as early as possible. If you feel like they're ready, at 14, if you feel like they're ready for some pre-employment services, they might not be ready for a job, but if you feel like they're ready for those pre-employment services, then let's get started earlier. That way we have time to provide all those services. And one thing that I did forget to mention, the nice thing about the pre-employment transition services, if we offer them at 14, things might look a little different by 18. So say we offer those in their 8th or 9th grade year, we can offer pre-employment transition services again when maybe they're a senior in high school, because they could probably benefit from having some additional instruction because maybe things have changed.
I think it's very important. That's one of the things that I missed when our son was going through high school, and I didn't know all this stuff. So that's why it's important. I keep trying to stress when your child does turn 14 or is in high school, has that IEP, to reach out to these groups and get connected with them, with, whether it's the County Board of DD Services and OOD, Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. Talk to the teacher maybe at school that's doing the IEP and say, hey, I'm interested in these different groups, just bringing them in, because it helps. I found when our son had an IEP, it helped having various people around the table, in the sense of being able to help. They couldn't totally like say, you need to do this or you need to do that. No, they listened, but it kind of gave you that ease that you had more than one set of ears on the whole IEP process and how to reach those goals. It was just a teamwork, is what I felt. We had a team around the table. Um, let's see. How, Rachel, you've been in this a long time, as far as back as I can remember. How many years have you been with Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities?
So I started in 2015 as a caseload assistant, and I got my caseload in 2019. So I've had my um, caseload for 7 years now, and it'll be 10 years that I've been here in August.
You had such a good presentation. I mean, you went for like a full hour nonstop. So it's like one of the parents said how well you know OOD, and you were just like, yeah, going through all the different layers of it. It was very informative.
And that's
Um,
and thank you for that, because it was funny, because earlier I was thinking about it and I'm like, I don't think I can talk for an hour. Like, I don't know. And then I wrote myself some notes, and then as I'm talking, I'm like, I see the clock at 6:50. I'm like, oh wow, okay, I guess I can talk for an hour.
Another thing like OOD, for us personally, just to let parents know, Rachel had mentioned about opening or closing cases. I mean, I think we've opened a case like 3 different times. He got his first job, and then his case closed, and then he wanted to change jobs, so we reopened. And, we've done it like 3 different times with OOD, closing a case and reopening. And they made it very easy to do. So if you have a job, if they want to look for a different job, I mean, they're not going to stay in that same job they get when they're in high school. They're going to change. And it's just helpful to know that you can, connect in with OOD to help with those, trying to find, that other job, maybe, or something. It's very helpful. Does anybody have any questions? You mentioned one other thing I wanted to point out. You mentioned driver's training. We did go through that with OOD's assistance with transportation to a job. Um, and that was very helpful because they do an evaluation. They had an evaluation done, and then we worked with somebody um, through to get his permit. It was a 2-year process, but he did get his driver's license eventually. There is a question here, Rachel. It says, hello, I have a 17-year-old child. We had his IEP and ETR meeting in December. At the meeting, we were talking about what his after high school plan will look like. The school psychologist said OOD can transport students to and from college. Could you please verify?
That is So I personally have never heard of us doing that. So typically where we can provide transportation would be um, to and from meetings, to and from like job development meetings, to and from a summer work experience program. But typically when it's college or work, we're not able to transport. Um, and that's where we would really work on that travel training or driving at that point to kind of assist with that transportation.
Oh, Rachel, is it all right if we would put your email and contact
Yeah,
in the chat box?
I'm trying to figure out how to get to the chat box so I can put that in
We
there.
have it all set. I have Michelle. She helps me. She's going to put your email and phone number in the chat box for
Okay,
you.
thank you. I appreciate that because I was trying to figure out where the chat button was to put that in there because I did want to mention that if any of you have any questions, definitely reach out to me. And also, if you have any more college specific questions, you can send those to me also. Then that way I can kind of pull in my C2C counselors to kind of help me with those.
The other thing, and I don't know if you still do it because it's been a number of years, but our when our son was going for a job, we found he had a little bit of hearing loss, and OOD helped us then with, I guess you'd consider it assistive technology, but he was able to, they helped us get a hearing aid to help
Mhm.
with his work. I don't, is that something, I mean, I know you mentioned
Yeah.
assistive technologies, does that fall into that ballpark as well?
So yeah, so we can do hearing aids, and we have actually specific counselors for the deaf who a lot of times typically they would work with our clients who are more severely hearing impaired, but other OOD counselors can authorize for hearing aids as well. It's a process. Um, I'm sure it was probably a process back then too, making
Yeah.
sure that there's only we can only cover to a certain rate and everything. But so yeah, it is a process, but it's something I think in my 10 years here I did do one hearing aid case one time. So yes, that is definitely something we still do.
So I just want to make sure, the audience here or the parents, if you're looking at your son or daughter going, with them going into employment or eventually going into employment, depending what their age is, there are several hurdles or challenges. That is something to bring up to if you want to talk to Rachel or talk to your SSA, your transition coordinator. Talk to the different ones and say, hey, I see this as probably a problem. Or if it's transportation, or maybe the driver's ed, we weren't sure if if our son would be able to drive. And he ended up driving. Like I said, it was a 2-year process, but he's driving. He's been driving now. mm, I guess it's been a good 15 years now. So hard to believe, but yeah. So if you find those challenges or something that's maybe holding you back or a concern, I would reach out and ask the question, whether it be hearing or sight or assistive technologies, maybe, I don't know, what everything they cover with assistive technology, like communication boards and that such thing too. Rachel, they help with some of those
Yeah,
kind of things.
I think so. If we can relate it to the job, definitely.
Okay.
Um, and another thought too on transportation is, once an individual has, accepted their high school diploma, if they have services through the Board of Developmental Disabilities, and I'm sure it varies in counties, but a lot of times the county can provide, transportation also. Um, so, sometimes they, for certain, more extended transportation, like I know there's transportation waivers and things, but typically, even if they don't have a transportation waiver, the county can do like transportation, like to and from work, or I imagine that would also qualify. That might be a to and from college possibility also.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Rachel while we have her on? I know like I said at the beginning, we've had so many presentations that have talked about OOD, and this is a great opportunity if you have, a question. One thing I wanted also to point out is when you bring in OOD, especially if you can get them in at 14, they get to know your child as they're going up through high school. So when you go to make that transition, they know them pretty well as they're trying to look at that first job or employment, and it gives them that opportunity to, learn who your child is and what their likes and dislikes are.
That's definitely true. I know, for me personally, I've had a few cases where I've had them open 6 or 7 years. So it's kind of the longest I think was maybe like 8. I think it was like 9 years, and it's kind of we're always happy for them when we close the case because that means they're working. But at the same time, it's kind of a little bit sad because we really get to know the families and the students and everything. So um, definitely, I've had a few cases like that where I feel like you just get to know them really well.
Once we finish up with this meeting, if you missed the link, we had the link there and I'll try to reshare it again. But Rachel's contact information is in there. I have the completing an application, the one flyer up on the screen, but to get to the other flyers, to look through them, I'm going to reshare that link, or Michelle, if you can reshare that link for me. We put in the Google Salt Drive, and we will be putting it into the live binder. I'm just going to stop the recording, Rachel, just for a few minutes, just to see if anybody, instead of adding a question to a chat, in case they wanted
Okay,
to ask you a
for
live
sure.
question. I always like to give them an opportunity to do that. So one
Mhm.
second while I stop my share. Stop share. And I'm going to shut the recording. Thank you again for presenting.
Yeah, of
It's very
course.
helpful. One second.